the travellers, the travelling community. I'm going to give you a bit of background history to my extended family. Collinses, Joyces, Doyles, Keenans, McDonoughs. We were known as the Midland Collinses, but we would have originated from Mayo. For 4 or 5 generations, we would have travelled the Midlands. Meath, Westmeath, Cavan, Kildare, Offaly. We would have made our living from chimbley sweeping, tinsmithing, buying and selling horses, making, painting and selling wagons, and begging and hawking. I was born in the mid-60s. At that time, there was a very big change coming to travellers' lives. The old traditional ways were dying out. The plastic came in, killed off the tinsmithing. The come-by harvester killed off the seasonal work. Travellers were getting rid of their horses and wagons and buying cars and trailers and moving to the big cities. My mummy and daddy were staying outside of a small little town called Kilbeggan in County Westmeath. My mummy was pregnant. She was having me. My mummy went into labour. My daddy ran 6 or 7 miles to the priestess house to call an ambulance. After a certain length of time, the ambulance came. My mummy was often telling me it was a very windy night. My mummy got into the back of the ambulance to make her way to Mullingar Hospital. A big tree fell down in the road. I was born in the back of an ambulance. That's why I always tell the same story. I'm always in a hurry, but I never get there in time. I have a young fella. He's 16 years of age. He's the only child in our whole extended family that's going to secondary school. A matter of fact, he's the only travelling child out of 900 pupils in the school. He got off the bus one day and he came onto the side with the school bag in his back. And he shouted to me, "Daddy!" I says, "What's wrong with you?" "I'm not going to school no more. None of my cousins are going to school, and every time I come onto the site with the school bag on my back, I think they're making a laugh at me." I said, "They're not making a laugh here, son." He said, "Daddy, they're all not going to school anymore, and they're out there working with their fathers, and they're making money, and some of them are getting married. I don't want to go to school anymore." I said, "The day you were born, son, I made a promise that you were going to go to school. You were going to get educated and you were going to do your leaving cert." "What about my cousins, Daddy?" I said, "I don't own your cousins, son. I own you. I want things to be different and better for you. It's up to their mothers and fathers to make things better for them, son." And then he said, "Daddy, do you mind if I ask you a question?" I said, "No, what is it?" He said, "How comes," he says, "you and Mummy left school when you were 10 and 11 years of age? I mean, you're travellers. You survived. You done all right." So you know nothing about my childhood. And you know nothing about my education. I was robbed of my education, son. He says, "What do you mean you were robbed of your education? Tell me your story, Daddy." I said, "You want to hear my story?" I was robbed of my education. And so was every travelling child that ever went to a segregated school in this country, both north and south. They were robbed. "Johnny, where you hiding, Johnny? Johnny, where you hiding, Johnny?" You know what our Johnny does, right? Every time me and Johnny plays hide and go seek, Johnny will go down the road and he'll find the best place to hide and he'll stay there all night and all day just to win the game. "Johnny, you're nothing but an idiot, Johnny. I'm not playing no more. Johnny, Mummy's putting on the spuds." "You're idiot, yeah? I don't care." My grandfather and grandmother were known as Mick and Biddy Collins, but to the other travellers, he was known as the Puckeen Collins, and she was known as old Biddy Doyle. My grandfather, right, had this big grey mare and a black foal and a big wagon. And my daddy, right, had a cart, a four-wheel cart, a black horse and a greyhound. I remember one day Mick and Biddy came home from the country and Mick was taking the harness off the horse and he was cursing and giving out, and I went out to him and the horse jumped up in the ditch and he pulled him down, and I said, Mick, are you all right, Mick? What are you cursing for? He said, listen out, son. He said, listen out. And I listened out and I could hear a sound like I said, what's that, Mick? He said, that sound is going to be the death of his yet, son. And the horse jumped up in the ditch again. And Mick pulled him down. And as Mick was tying him to the ditch, he said to me, run quick, he says, and get a Gansey off Biddy. A Gansey is what settled people call a jumper. I ran up to Biddy and I says, Biddy, Mick says, have you got a Gansey? And I ran down and I gave it to my grandfather. You know what my grandfather done? He got down on one knee and he tied the horse's front leg with one sleeve of the Gansey. And then he tied the horse's other leg with the other sleeve of the Gansey. And I was scratching my head. Oh, he says, Mick, what are you doing that for, Mick? Well, he said, do you see, son? He says, when the horse is on the side of the road, eating the grass, when he has to move, he'll make a little hop. And he won't drift away, son, because if he breaks into the farmer's field, the farmer will call the guards. The guards will come, kick the fire up on top of us, and make us move on. I never forgot that. I remember one time, right? Me and my mummy and all the rest of the children were on the side of the road, and all the other travellers were gone. And my mummy tied me and our Johnny to the wattles of the tent and put 2 girdle dresses on us. Because you see, my mummy had to go on across the field to get sticks and water, and there was too many of us to bring with us, and she'd be afraid that we'd get knocked down on the road, or when she's going into the field, into the ditch, that we'd fall into the water and drown. So she tied me and our Johnny to the wattles of the tent. And comes this policeman in a big black bike. Hello, Mrs. Collins. My mummy tried to explain. Well, do you see, guard? I have to go across that field to get sticks and water, and there's too many of them children for to bring with me, and I'd be afraid to get hurt or fall into the ditch, and I had to tie them to the wattle of the tent. Untie the children, Mrs. Collins. And my mummy did. You know what the policeman done? He went away in his big black bike, and he came back with a big yoke of sticks. And then he went off on the bike again, and he came back with a big yoke, a big churn of water for my mummy. I never knew his name. I tell you, he was a nice policeman. I remember saying to him, Mummy, I can understand you, Mummy, tying us to the wattles of the tent because you didn't want us to run out on the road and get hurted. But Mummy, what was the idea of putting 2 girls' dresses on 2 young fellas for? Well, she says, we were so poor that time, we would have put any clothes we got on the children. And the reason for the dresses was we couldn't afford the nappies. And when you were out running up and down the road playing, everywhere it dropped, it stood. That's what my mummy says. The most colourful character in my childhood was my daddy's Aunt Biddy. Biddy was only a small little woman, about 4 foot odd. She had this long grey plait running down along her back, and she used to smoke a little clay pipe. She used to wear a black shawl and a black skirt that ran the whole way down to her 2 boots. And she used to wear her little beady pocket. That's Biddy's beady pocket there. And she used to carry her stuff in the inside of it. And the reason for the buttons was, say if the traveller women were going away, they would give each other a button for a keepsake and they'd sew it on. And then when they met in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, they'd say, and do you still have that button I gave you? I have. And that's how to start off the conversation. And they'd know about the gossip and the talk from other people and other places that they've all been in. But everybody loved to see Biddy, and everybody used to love to see Biddy coming. But you see, you'd always hear Biddy before you'd see her. Because you see, Biddy had this big black mule called Jimmy the Gob, and they were always arguing with each other. You could hear her half a mile up the road. If you don't do what you're told, I'll bait you with the stick, Jimmy the Gob. And her little black and white dog, and he'd run along beside her. But everybody used to love to see her coming, because you see, everybody knew they were going to get something. All the older travellers knew they were going to get tobacco or fags. All the children knew they were going to get sweets. But everybody on the road knew they were going to get fed. Not alone did Biddy feed all the travelling children on the road, But she'd feed all the settled children that followed her back to the camp. Biddy would pull down the road, tie her mule to the ditch and take the harness off them. Then she'd go over and she'd get a big pot of spuds in the skin and she'd put it on the fire. And then when they were boiled, she'd take it off and she'd put it onto a flour bag. And when she put it onto a flour bag, because the flour bag had all these small little holes in it, the water would seep through. Then she'd go to her little box and she'd take out a handful of salt and she'd put the salt over the spuds. Then she'd go back to the box again and she'd get a lump of country butter and she'd peel the butter over the spuds. We were all standing back again the ditch. We were all looking down. You could see the steam coming up off the spuds and the butter melting down through them. You could smell the butter. I'm starving, lads. I'd love one of them spuds with ye. But we knew we couldn't go down there. Because you see, Biddy had this little black and white dog and he never liked children. If you went down, he'd eat you. So Biddy went for a beady pocket and she'd take out an ounce of tobacco and she'd cut it in half. And she'd take the other half and she'd put it back into her pocket for herself and she'd walk over and she'd say to the dog, well, I'm giving you this now, do you hear me, gummy mouth? And when them children come down here, I want you to leave them alone. And she'd throw the tobacco down. And because he'd no teeth, he'd be chawing and gnawing at it for an hour and he'd go away from the fire. And then Biddy would call us, come down here, the whole lot of you. We'd all run down and we'd gather around the spuds, with some of the spuds cracked open. And the steam coming up off them and the butter melting down through them. Our Martin put his hand down for a spud. Oh, Biddy, that's roasting. Well, let it cool down then. Let it cool down. And as I was standing there, looking at the butter melting through the spuds and the steam coming up off them, I looked around and I could see the big old grey mare with her little black foal running in under her legs and around. And then I seen the old traditional tent with the cover turned up on the side and all the hay and straw busting out the side of it where you knew you were going to sleep that night. And the old barrel top wagon with the sun shining on the canvas. And my old grandfather sitting at the fire tapping at his bucket. And every time he'd throw a stick in the fire, the smoke and sparks would curl up in the air. And as he was tapping at his bucket, he was singing to himself, boil up the bacon, the cabbage, the greens, have plenty of spuds with butter between, for 8 empty bellies will soon need a fill. Can I my butter spuds now, Biddy?